Welcome to the Happy Hour Money Podcast. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Douglas, with the always excited Josh Bennett. I'm trying to think of something I was like, I might get myself in trouble here.
I thought you were going to go, dashing or something like that, but excited works.
Today topic is going to be around starting a small business or just business ownership in general. And this is obviously a huge, broad topic that we could probably break down into like sub little mini episodes. So for those that are listening, if it is a topic that you like, obviously feedback helps, where maybe there's something we say and you're like, ooh, you should do an episode specifically on that. Feedback's great. You can certainly do that by reaching out to us via social media and letting us know, but we appreciate those that are listening. And so thinking about small business, there's tons of different statistics. And when you think about small business in the United States, like that has kind of been what's built a lot of, job creation and other things. And we've talked about, the dreaded R word, which is a recession, which we think is on the horizon or already here, depending on who you ask. And a lot of businesses are started in recessions where maybe people are laid off and they maybe have time to think about something else. But when you think about a small business, the stats are, a third of them will make it 10 years. So there's a lot of businesses that won't make it. And how do we think about ensuring if we're one of those businesses that we survive? And I think that's maybe a good spot to start with of, the odds aren't really great at times for small business, but at the same time, why are people wanting to do it? Well, they want to be their own boss. They don't have to answer to someone else, or they have an idea to improve on something. So when you think about small businesses, kind of what are your thoughts there, Josh? And obviously we're partial since we are small business owners, but how do you think about it? And how do you talk to people about an interest in small businesses?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the important things with thinking through like why start a small business, like you said, the stats are not always the most uplifting, and a lot of people have a trepidation around starting a business, especially. So, why do it? I think it really boils down to control over your destiny. Like that, to me, there's no better way to get to what we call work optional than being a small business owner. And if you look at the stats of like, okay, who are millionaires, who are the financially independent people in our country, who are the the uber wealthy, like as you go up in net worth, the proportion of like that net worth that is either privately held businesses or real estate just skyrocket compared to the average Joe. And it's because owning a business is one of the best ways to build wealth, and one of the best ways to or even if you're not building wealth, just to create cash flow to become more independent, especially financially. And I think that's often forgotten just because everyone kind of focuses on the risks like you mentioned. But I think if we look at the risks, why do a lot of businesses fail? And I don't have any necessary data around this, but I think anecdotally, and I'd love your opinion on this, but I think a lot of businesses fail because either one, the business owners overreach, it was not a business idea that they should have started in the first place, or they just, sort of, for lack of a better term, half-ass it. Because a lot of people come into business, thinking that it's going to be, they're going to be able to just do a job, basically. Which there's a lot of things that go into a business that a lot of people don't realize. Like, doing your own taxes, doing your own books, all these different things. So it just requires you learning a lot of different skill sets, or hiring the right people to do those skill sets, which I think people often don't do, get in trouble financially or with the authorities or whatever that sort of get them in a bind. But if you do your homework, do your due diligence, you're going to be way ahead of the curve starting a business to begin with. Would you say that's a fair assessment, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I pulled up a bunch of different like stats and statistics, and so there's a U.S. bank study that talks about 82%. So this is probably only small businesses that were with U.S. banks, so take it with a grain of salt. There's obviously businesses that are banked by other banks, but 82% of the business failures that they saw were due to cash flow, and I would say that would be accurate. So going back to, hey, I'm going to charge X for this, and this can work, and I can make money, but then not factoring in all the other costs that are going to be there. And I think one of the big challenges for a lot of small business owners is starting with the end in mind. So where do you want it to go? And don't be like, oh, I need to grow. And then like all of a sudden trying to figure out how to do that when you should have thought of that at the beginning and kind of built that into the assumptions of your business, right? Because if you're assuming it's always just going to be you and you're never going to hire anyone else, all of a sudden you're hiring people. Now you're paying payroll tax. Now you're paying maybe benefits. Now you're, needing to pay for these other people to do things. And that's a responsibility too, right? There's a huge responsibility when you are now employing people that's their livelihood. So that's something that I think is super important. And there's a stat from 2019, so this is pre-COVID, but 64% of the new jobs in the United States is from small businesses. And I think that is actually really cool. And I think there's probably some changes, and it'll be really interesting to see how the data comes out, post-COVID, because so many small businesses closed and are done. But a lot of small businesses are those local restaurants or, service businesses. There's still a ton of, and we see it probably more here in the Midwest, right? Little manufacturing businesses that are boring, beautiful, like, hey, it's a coating company that has, 15 people and it's really profitable. And the person's ran it for 30 years and they make good money. Now they're not, making millions of dollars. They're not on the front page of different papers, but it's like, yeah, they cash heavy, good, niche business that there's not, Amazon's going to come in and take their business. And it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And they don't have a natural person to sell to. And I think that's something we talk about all the time, is like, there are really great businesses that are run by baby boomers that they don't have anyone to sell to. They don't know what's next. And it's like, how do they take this business that has value and transition it to someone else? And I think there are super opportunities there. And I know you've talked about that a lot.
Yeah, we definitely, and I think that could be a whole episode in and of itself, talking through kind of just buying a business versus starting one. I mean, I think if you're going to start one, starting with the end in mind and knowing, are you trying to build what we would classify as like an enterprise with, multiple employees, things like that, or are you trying to build a lifestyle business that can just, be a job that you have control over, or I guess more control over. And, that how you structure the business is going to be, very different which avenue you go, as you mentioned. But yeah, I mean, I think something that's also forgotten is like in the, I guess these days, everyone looks at like the entrepreneurial heroes like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and everyone wants to be the next tech founder. And when they think of starting a business, that's what they're thinking of is, hey, I need to build an Amazon, or I need to go raise venture capital or things like that, which really isn't the case at all. I mean, there's like you said, like a lot of businesses are super boring, like at least, not pretty or glamorous, or not going to get you on the front page of the news. They can be fun in their own right, just depending on how you run the business.
Absolutely.
But like, anytime there's a need, period, you can have a business. Like if people have a need, like, I mean, just think about what's happened in the pandemic, like to your point of like the boring businesses in the Midwest. I've been trying to get work done on my house and pay a contractor. Can't for the life of me find a contractor that is willing to take the job within the next year and a half, because they're all booked up.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a young, enterprising person, like, granted, there's a skill set there, but why not go start a contracting business, learn the stuff, invest like 6 months into, I mean, you could always go to trade school, you could always do these things, like, but I mean, I know some of these contractors that have seen the profit and loss statements can make hundreds of thousands of dollars, even as a small business. Like if they can grow an enterprise and be worth multi-millions. So I mean, same with like landscaping. Like you can start a landscaping company for basically next to nothing in terms of upfront cost. I mean, you could lease a mower, or you could basically finance a professional mower, which, like, say there's a $5,000 lawnmower, finance it over 10 years with minimal interest. And next thing you know, you're in business for landscaping. Go just start, go print out at Kinko's, 1,000 flyers and start dropping them in people's mailboxes.
Yep.
Like the need is there. Like I guarantee, like you probably get 20 clients just on that.
Yeah. And Intuit, which has QuickBooks, so obviously they have tons of good data. I mean, back to your point, you don't have to start an Amazon. There's a stat here, and I don't know the year that it's from, but it was, 64% of small business owners are starting with like $10,000, which if you're working for someone else for a while and you have an emergency fund, or you're thinking about, maybe I do want to get out of this role. This isn't what I want to do forever. I want to start my own thing. You kind of build out what the business model looks like, who you're going to serve, and make sure there is demand. And I think that's the key thing. Like, you can have a creative idea, but there might not be people that are willing to pay for it. And so you need to kind of gauge interest there. And you can, ask friends, family, just go sit with people, take them out to coffee and ask and kind of say, hey, would this be something you'd be interested in? But the other thing that you talked about too is, you don't need massive amounts of growth to have a really profitable business that can sustain you. In the average small business owner salary, and again, this is so blended across the board, it's like $60,000. It's not, most small business owners are not mega uber wealthy, right? Like it is something that a lot of times is giving them freedom and flexibility, which to them, has a value to it as well. But, making $60,000 in Des Moines, Iowa and $6,000 in LA are very different, right? On like what you're able to get by on. So it's important to understand there are going to be geographic differences. And then also there's geographic opportunities where there's certain businesses that will never work in Indiana that would be a, gold mine in Florida. Big one I think of is like pools, right? Like not as many pools in Indiana as there is in Florida. So if you have a business,
maybe a pool filling and emptying,
yeah,
or winterizing,
winterizing for sure. But there are a lot of different things that you can look at from a boring business that you can go make six figures, doing a lawn care, taking leaves off of roofs, cleaning gutter, like you can do all kinds of things that are not sexy, glamorous. But if you have, you went to college, you have a good skill set, you have the chops to do something. Sometimes you don't always have to go alone either. And I think that's an interesting conversation. Like you can start it and then you can look at trying to find and fill in kind of where the gaps are in your skill set over time, because there's not one person, Bezos, Musk, all those people, right, that can do it all. They never have, right? A lot of those people are really good delegators and at finding other people to kind of come on and let them do some of the work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, a common misconception that, people think that there's all these upfront costs and that like, I don't have the money, I don't have the wherewithal or knowledge base to do it. But every single person out there has a skill set of some sort. And everybody has something that annoys them as a problem. Like I can pretty much guarantee anybody you talk to them, like they may say they have no business ideas, talk with them for 5-10 minutes, they'll have a business idea. Just if you, guide the right questions of like, what are things that bother you during the day? And if it bothers you, I can almost guarantee it bothers other people. Whether it's lack of time or all these things, like, kind of going back to the contractor thing, like, that was one of the things I did this summer was, I really enjoy mowing my lawn and doing lawn work. But with an infant in business and stuff to run, I just didn't have the time to dedicate to that anymore. So I hired somebody out. And like, but as watching, the quality of work and things like that, I was immediately like, I could run a better lawn care business.
Sure.
But like, just be like, for the, one example is, couldn't even pay by credit card, for example. And so like, a young millennial out there that's hungry could probably take over a lot of landscaping companies by just integrating the ability to pay online or, set up a subscription where people don't have to think about writing a check or think about paying an invoice, because that's just one more thing that bothers people. Like, so there's just,
especially if you're trying to get cash flow in a business early on and you need to get paid and you don't have a lot of runway, it's like the quickness of payment is going to be more important than trying to maximize every penny and dollar. The other thing you can do is you can just have a phone and you can just collect lightning payments on your phone and collect Bitcoin. And the grandma's probably not going to pay you in Bitcoin, but you could teach her. She might be interested.
Yeah,
so
there you go. But yeah, I mean, but I think people think they have to create this new idea, but it doesn't have to be a new idea. It just has to be a better idea. Like a landscaping company is not a new idea. There's thousands upon thousands of landscaping companies out there. But again, like a lot of these are antiquated with tech. A lot of them are antiquated in terms of the service, or just don't have to try very hard because people will just use them. They're very recession proof. People need their lawns mowed, grass keeps growing, all these different things. Well, if you come and make it more efficient, easier for people, have better customer service, top-notch quality or whatever, you will get business. Like it doesn't have to be reinventing the wheel. It could just be doing something better.
Yeah. And there are a lot of, we talk about like the gig economy. So we're talking about like the boring businesses that you see and think about like, oh, I wonder how much, business there is out there in these different kind of more manual jobs. But for those that are, thinking about how can I optimize this and kind of have the Tim Ferriss like 4-hour work week and do things where I can be much more flexible. Because if it is a lawn care business, for a while, you're going to be the one out there, edging and trimming and mowing, right, to get your crew up and running, because it's going to take a little while. There's a ton of people that sell courses, right, like on Gumroad, these different things. And I've not bought all of them, but I'm sure there's plenty that are just garbage. So part of it is marketing, part of it is social proof. But if you are talented at a job, that you have a skill set that is kind of rare, that you can teach and educate someone else, and they don't necessarily need to go get the degree, but if they wanted to learn coding, for example, or these different things that they can help make their business better, people will pay you $25, $30, $45, $50 for a really good thing, and then get reviews, get people to promote it, give discounts, like find ways to do that. And that's a way where you can also, grow, again, kind of like a side hustle that could grow into something where you can quit your, 9 to 5 or whatever your, current role or job is. The other thing is, from a marketing perspective, and I think if you do a great job at whatever service or whatever business you do, but no one knows you're there, you won't last long, right? So the idea of marketing and just learning that, and I think there is a big gap in skill set from, let's say, the older generations to younger generations on how to market and build a brand and use social media for that. So lean into that. And I think if you did buy a old unsexy business, and again, maybe it's B2B, so business to business, or maybe it is business to consumer, but if you're trying to attract consumers, yeah, you should absolutely be leveraging, social media. The business to business, maybe it's more old school, maybe it's trade shows and conferences and all that kind of stuff, but you can still use social media for a lot of brand recognition and also like highlighting what you do. And so that's something where maybe that is your skill set, maybe it's not. So there's an opportunity for you, if you're good at marketing, to go to some of these businesses that just have horrible, online presence or just a lack of it and say, hey, I can help you grow. Because right now, if you can help someone's bottom line and you can say, hey, here's an ROI, this is what it would look like, they're probably going to say, okay. They might be skeptical at first, but if you can help, and maybe the first handful of people you work with, you give them a discount, right? Hey, I'll give you a discount, give me good reviews, maybe be, a source or reference for the next people I work with, you can get something up and running and working pretty well. So I think it's trying to understand, what are you good at, or what do people say, like, oh, you're really naturally interested in this thing. And it doesn't have to be your current day job, but then lean into that, because if you're trying to start a business that you just think like, oh, this is really profitable, I need to go into healthcare, like that's where all the money's to be made right now, but you hate it and you have no knowledge or expertise, yeah, you're going to be one of the statistics that's not around in 10 years. So you probably need to go where you have some sort of advantage versus incumbents or others in the space. So go to where your skill set is best or where you can be best.
Or going back to your point, like say landscaping or whatever is not your skill set or not what you enjoy, but building out, like say you were working in customer service now as your W-2 job.
Yep.
And you're really good at building out customer service platforms. Okay, we'll go find a person that's really good at the landscaping and partner up. You run the customer service, they run the landscape.
They're fine to work 65 hours a week and like just run, but they don't want to worry about invoicing or marketing.
Talking to people.
Yeah,
they just don't like talking to people.
I want to go mow. Don't make me talk to people.
Yeah, like I'm throwing my podcast for 40 hours and call it a day. There are people like that. So I mean, you can find the right person to, again, like you mentioned earlier, meet your deficiencies and skill sets. And that's like, I mean, we did that ourselves. Like,
yeah,
there's things Isaiah is much better at. Granted, we're both in finance, but there's things Isaiah that, when it comes to running a business, is much better at than I am, and vice versa. And so that's where, we partnered up. So I mean,
yeah, I don't touch QuickBooks, by the way. So there's a funny story there.
And I love QuickBooks. So that's where, like, that's where you find people with different interests and stuff, and you can create kind of a beautiful thing. You don't have to go it alone.
Yep.
And you don't have to start with like, kind of we were talking about earlier, and this gave me an idea when you were mentioning Gumroad and stuff and the gig economy. But I've seen entrepreneurs making millions of dollars on Fiverr. So if you're not familiar with like Fiverr, it's basically it started as like hey, pay $5 for whatever task, and we use it a lot in our business to do graphic designs and all these different things. But you can have a profile on Fiverr that basically says like, hey, I'll do graphic design or video editing, or I'll create you an Excel spreadsheet or program something for you, whatever. Like whatever you're doing in your current job is your skill set. If you love it or hate it or whatever, maybe you love the skill set, you just hate the employer or whatever the case may be, or you get fired, you can set up a profile on Fiverr and just start doing it freelance and charge a specific hourly rate, and you can grow it that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily. Now you have, potentially hundreds of thousands of employers, quote unquote, compared to your one. So your chances of going hungry, the odds go much, much better in your favor.
And it's international. It's not just in your local area, which is crazy. Yeah. So, I've hired people in Turkey that have done podcast editing before. He does a great job, right? It works. Yeah, and so you literally can just go out and find the best people that are priced at a point where it makes sense, and go from there. So it is, I think Fiverr, Upwork, and then like 99 Designs is more specific for stuff. But like Fiverr and Upwork, you can kind of do anything. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. So if you have something you enjoy, just post it on Fiverr, and I'm sure there are people that are out there looking for that skill set. Like I actually, back in the day before I started my business and just needed some side income before I was married and all that stuff and had free time. I did some video editing on sites like that, and it was decent money. But I had a background in video editing. I enjoyed video editing. Still do. It's like a nice creative outlet. And so, like, to me, it didn't feel like I was working a second job. I was just kind of playing around with my hobby, just with someone else's video instead of my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like, you can kind of think of it that way, and it's some people may not view that as a business, but it is.
Yeah, I want to go back to the idea of like building something with the end in mind, because I think that's really important of like what you want the business to be. You don't have to be the super high end, high touch. You can be, hey, we're going to be, less expensive. We're going to be really efficient. Like, just make sure that you are consistent with whatever your deliverable or what you're providing to the marketplace is. So I'm having this draft beer that's in the space that we work out of, and it is from Sun King Brewery, which is probably the biggest brewery in Indianapolis. And is their beer drastically better than every other brewer? No, I actually like another brewer better. But you know what Sun King's done a fantastic job at is building their brand. They've gotten partnerships and relationships, and they're opening a location in northern Indiana. They're opening a location in Florida just because enough people go down to Florida, I saw the other day. So like they're growing and being able to expand. And the brewery business is a tough one where it kind of goes through phases where everyone's going to do it, and then the craft brewer scene like kind of shrinks, where it's hard. And so they've done a really good job at building a brand and having, the experience of this is what Sun King stands for. And to me, that's really important because, at the end of the day, the products are fairly similar. Like you could exchange things like, oh, this is a Sun King beer. If you've never had it before, are you going to know that beer is Sun King? No, right? But there's other things that they build around it and do a great job. Like they are the beer sponsor of one of the AAA baseball teams, right? They're there. They are all over the place where a lot of their competitors and peers just aren't, where, hey, they're smaller brewers. You got to come to their, tap room, but they're fantastic. Like they're still like the talent level maybe is not as big between how they're brewing things and what they're designing from a taste perspective, but they've just done a fantastic job at building a brand, coming to market, and really continuing to push.
Yeah, and there's an idea in business that like, the elevator pitch. If you're writing an elevator up one floor, how do you get your message across to somebody? And I said, it can become a rallying cry for businesses and stuff too, but also a way they run, like especially as businesses get bigger and bigger and more complex, it can be a guiding principle. And especially as you're starting a business, there's a lot of ways there's a lot of shiny objects that can pull you in different directions. But if you kind of stick to your mantra that you set up from the beginning, it makes it much easier. One of the most famous examples is Southwest. Southwest is the low-cost airline. Like that has been their mantra from day one. Everything they do is basically around like being the low-cost airline. And like you kind of see that throughout like all the decisions they made, how they think about things, like how they, they don't care about like the status and privilege that like some of the other airlines do with like first class, blah, blah, because doing that delays, it's actually less efficient to onboard a plane that way. And so therefore it's more expensive because of time. When, that 30 minutes difference, over hundreds of planes or thousands of planes a day, et cetera, adds up. But they made that decision intentionally because that made them be the low cost airline. And so you can do that same principle and kind of take that idea of like, okay, I'm going to be the highest quality lawn care provider in Indianapolis. And then every decision you make going forward is going to be built around how do I become the highest quality lawn care person? Maybe I use the best products. Maybe I, always keep my blades sharp on my mowers or whatever. But that's, to your point, that's a really good guiding principle.
And I think you can, and this is one thing that we did when we came together and merged our two businesses, and it took us a little while, but we had talked about it, but like documenting kind of where and how the culture and the mission and values and all these things. And it sounds like touchy-feely and, oh, that's cute, like I don't really need that. But it can really help then too as you try to hire and recruit people so that they have the same onboarding or the same kind of things that are taught to them as far as like, these are really important to us. These are words that mean something. And there are companies that have done that extremely effectively. And it is important because you want everyone kind of rowing the same direction for understanding, like, what are we trying to accomplish here? What is the key thing? At the end of the day, what is my mission? Who am I taking care of? How am I doing it? And then how are we going to hold people, accountable from there? And doing that, it takes a little bit of time, but you can borrow. So my first mentor, he taught me a term called SWIPE, which was steal with integrity and pride. So just take these different ideas that you hear from others. So again, like we talked about with business earlier, you don't have to recreate the wheel and make this, massive new product that's never been seen before, because that's a lot of pressure. And, maybe you are the next genius that's coming out somewhere and can figure all this stuff out. Most people aren't that. They're going to adapt and say, good idea, my twist, my spin on it. This is the business. So you want to iterate and just make it a little bit better, faster, quicker, cheaper, whatever. But having those guiding principles or being able to borrow, especially from other industries. So you can look at another industry that's doing something really interesting and say, no one in this area over here is doing anything like that. Let's just take that idea and bring it over here. Cool, swipe it, and then continue moving forward. I think that's a really good idea for a lot of business owners or people that are thinking about starting their business.
Yeah, agreed. So kind of changing the tables to like beyond kind of the ideation of a business. I think a lot of times people sort of hesitate because of the idea, like, I don't have the money or the funds to start a business. If you were, say, starting from scratch and kind of sitting in that boat, what are some avenues that you would pursue to start a business? Let's say along the QuickBooks lines, let's say it's a $10,000 business.
Yeah, so the first thing that I would do, and I think I'll just give a real world example. So I had saved into a Roth IRA at 19. Not everyone does that. Again, I started that, but what I could do was take out those contributions that I'd put in because it'd been open for 5 years, and I basically used that to help start the business that I started. I think it was just under $20,000 is what I kind of did for my capital contribution, right? So that initial amount that I wanted to put into the business, and I was able to do that, and there's no penalty or tax because that money going into that Roth IRA is already taxed, and it was my contribution. It wasn't necessarily the growth, so that was one way to do it. One thing that I've seen people do, and you got to be careful if you're going to leave that employer soon. I mean, 401ks, you can take a loan against those, but if you leave your employer, those loans are then due 60, 90 days. So if you say, hey, I'm going to take a $30,000 loan to start my business, and then all of a sudden you're not there anymore, that then becomes due, or it's going to become taxable. But those are two easy ways if you already have savings. You could look at, hey, if I own a home and I have a lot of equity in my home, maybe a home equity line of credit is cheaper. There are companies that will do like micro lending, that you can be a startup. You don't have to have a revenue model. You don't have to have all these things, but they want to help you. And maybe you do need that $7,500, $10,000, $15,000 loan. And you could reach out to, a lot of times local banks will refer to these other lenders. I know here in Central Indiana, there's, I'm spacing on the name right now all of a sudden, but it is there. And I know that they then offer certain resources, but it's funded partially from the federal government and the SBA and other things to help entrepreneurs with things. You could look at, if you were buying an existing business, like an SBA loan, which I know you have more experience, we could probably talk a little bit about that. But that's a great option where you don't have to put a ton of money down to make those deals happen. Now there's extra paperwork and some fun things that go into that. But I think, that Roth IRA, maybe a 401k loan, looking at if you own a home equity line of credit, you can also source, family and friends. That gets kind of tricky at times depending on what kind of business it is and if people believe in the idea, but having conversations and being open, I know that's worked for some people. For other people, they would never want to touch that. So I think you have to kind of evaluate where you're at with the comfort level there. But yeah, anytime you mix family and finances, it gets messy. So just word of caution there. I would much rather try to find a way to borrow from a bank or do it myself, but there are success stories that I know of that people have been able to tap in, and they're paying them back. They have something drafted up. It is, still maybe a sweetheart deal, but it is something where they are, the person that's giving the money is earning interest or they're doing something with it. So it's not just like it's a gift or, there is some loan structures. But you want to talk a little bit about SBA and your experiences with that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, but before I dive into SBA, like one of the things you mentioned too, and I may have a slightly different opinion on this, but like to me, like, there's no harm in taking from your 401k as well. I mean, if you think about it this way, businesses are one of the best tax structures that exist. I mean, 401ks are nice, but a business can be just as tax efficient, if not even sometimes more tax efficient, because you get the money today and get the tax benefits. But most of the times with starting up a business, you're going to have a decent amount of expenses the first year. So if you do that distribution, well, pretty much the taxes that you got on the distribution should be offset by the taxes from starting the business, or the tax deductions from starting the business. So really, you're going to be like, you're not really setting yourself back, because you're still putting it in a tax efficient manner, using it in a tax efficient manner. Yeah. But you're using it in money that could be captured today as opposed to 50 years from now, right? And for a lot of people, especially if you're worried about layoffs or trying to make big life changes, I think it's a untapped source for a lot of people, but they've been kind of coached from day one not to touch their 401ks till age 60. And I think this is one instance where it can make a lot of sense. Obviously use the loan first, but don't be afraid of like, hey, if that does become taxable, well, you did for a reason, right? The other one that you didn't hear you mention, but I think it's like, I've actually started a couple businesses this way. If you have good credit, a lot of credit cards will offer 15-month, 18-month, zero APY, so zero interest rate credit. So I mean, you can get $15,000 at zero interest for 18 months. Go use that to buy your lawnmower, your new computer to start the business, whatever the case may be, and then just hustle for a year and a half to make sure you pay it off before interest rate kicks in. Like, that's another interesting route that doesn't require you to have capital today. But yeah, in terms of SBA loans, like SBA loans and more traditional bank financing tend to be tough, especially for someone starting a business. The SBA does provide a lot of incentives for banks to use them, but the problem is that there's risk when it comes to starting a business, as everyone well knows. And part of why we're having this conversation in the first place is to sort of shed some light on that. But banks don't want to lend when there's a lot of risk, and so the catch-22 is to get an SBA loan is you need to be in a good financial position with your business. And the catch-22 part of that is, well, the people that are in a good financial position with their business typically don't need an SBA loan.
Yeah. Please graduate from college with 3 years of experience for this role. It's like, okay, help me get the 3 years of experience.
yeah, exactly. So like I tend to not tell anyone trying to start a business that, hey, go the traditional bank financing route, because it just doesn't work for most people. However, you can go buy a business, like you mentioned, with an SBA loan without like the same issues, because basically they'll use the existing business's finances that you'd be acquiring is what they'd be managing the risk on. So like a common one I like to talk through, it was a landscaping business I saw it was about $3 million in revenue. It was for sale for $1.2 million, which both seem like a lot of money, especially for someone timid about starting a business. But with an SBA loan, you can put 10% down, which in this case would be $120,000. You can also split that with the seller, so you can buy a business for 5% down, and so call it $60,000, right? So this is where it gets really interesting, is the cash flow to the owner of that business per year was $800,000. So you would literally pay yourself back in about 2 months. That's $60,000. And with that $800,000, you could go hire somebody that has like an MBA and stuff to actually run the business if you don't want to. And still you're taking a ton of money home for a reasonable investment, right? There's obviously still risks and things like that. You still have to pay the loan back for the SBA. But, if you are looking at buying a existing business, it can be a very interesting route to go. Like, because you can do the same math on, say, a $200,000 business, where maybe you have $20,000 down payment where you're splitting with a seller for $10,000. And now we're back at that $10,000 of, the cash flow might not be as good.
Sure.
But if you're looking for a business that you can start and run, replace an existing job, that could be a very good model. So it kind of depends. Like, if you're interested in buying a business, SBA and traditional financing can be a great option. Otherwise, you kind of have to get creative. But the other thing we didn't talk about too is like along the ideas of having a partner. You don't necessarily have to just have a partner that has a skill set. You can have a partner that has money that doesn't want to be involved in a business.
Yep.
That's another way to go about it, is like, hey, you have money, I don't. I have hustle, you don't.
Yeah. You just want to return on all the cash you're sitting on, and I want to start this business. Let's come to terms.
Yeah.
So I can give, actually, that's a great point. And I like the idea of the credit cards too. Obviously that there's risk associated with that when it turns back on in 15 or 18 months and it's 22%, if you don't pay it down, like that can be a quick road to ruin, but it does give you some runway, which I think is a really good idea of just how to do this, how to think through it, how to weigh the risks, pros and cons. But there's a veterinarian that I work with, and he wanted to have the building for his startup and was, kind of struggling with how to make all that happen, where he was going to start the business and need a loan for that, but then also needed the real estate, didn't want to do like the traditional lease structure. And there was a person that was wanting to go in with him, where if he put down 20%, they would do 80% and they could buy it, and then come to terms where he could actually acquire the real estate at a predetermined price. And so it helped the person that was putting in the money, where it was kind of like an option that was an obligation for him to then have to buy it down the road, where they knew they had a natural buyer, they knew what the lease rate would be, they knew the business plan, and they were able to come to terms with it, where they were able to bring the money because they had the money. They wanted to acquire something, they get a good yield on the money, he gets gets the building for his business. So there are a lot of, I think, interesting ways to do that. And, through connections, through community, I think you can find those kind of people. And it's not maybe advertised a lot, but I think if you start having conversations and say, this is what I'm trying to do, you can find those people in your, connection group, friends group, what organizations you're involved in. You can probably find a person that would be interested in having at least a conversation, or introduce you to someone that will have that conversation.
Yeah, or just like, if you want to start a business, start going to chambers of commerce meetings. You don't have to have a business to join these things. You can go to, like, there's meetups all over the city. You just have to kind of a quick Google search, you could probably find 10.
Yep.
And then you just start going, networking, meeting people, and next thing you know, you might find the person that is that right fit. And yeah, it can take some time to do that, but the more and more you try, the luckier you get at finding the right person.
Totally.
And the more due diligence you do up front, well, when you find the business idea, or have it fully crafted, then next thing you know, you're going to be in a position where you can just make things legit and move forward.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for small businesses today? I know it's a super broad question, not taking an industry. I have an answer, but I'm curious what
for existing small businesses, or like starting the business.
Let's say let's say existing, because I think starting, it's probably going to be a one-man show, so that changes things a little bit. For an existing business that is established.
For an existing business that's established, I think the biggest challenge is, managing the time, managing the, like, all the different kind of aspects within there. Because it can be one of those things, and I'm guilty of this all the time, where, I want to get to where I want my business to be, the expedited route. Sure. But the expedited route doesn't exist. Like, there's no fast lane in business. Like, you hear the glamour stories and stuff, but I'm a firm believer that even the glamours, like, look at Amazon, like, everyone thinks they were an overnight success. But, like, there's so many stories and stuff of, like, Jeff Bezos, and pictures of Jeff Bezos, like, in a really crappy office for a long time, just like, hammering through night and day. But with that, I think it's, oftentimes, like, you try to take on too much as a entrepreneur, wanting to try and find that fast lane, and it can be, there's sacrifices that come with that.
Sure.
And being able to balance those sacrifices, like, I think that's challenging for a lot of people and a lot of owners, and figuring out which one is more important. Like, what are the sacrifices you're willing to make and what you're not willing to make before things break.
Yep.
Because I'd be willing to bet, like, a lot of those businesses that fold are due to burnout, or due to cash flow from trying to hit the fast lane and trying to do too
Could
many
be
things.
family related, where they just
divorce,
yeah.
like, because, entrepreneurship is hard on not just you, but also your partner.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I would think it's kind of the biggest challenge for owning a business. What about you? What's your answer?
I cheated because there's a graphic here that says what it is or what they think. Right, it's this article, but I think it's true, and it's staffing. It's finding good people.
Yeah,
it just seems
especially right now.
Yeah, right now it is people. It is finding high quality people. I think that has been universally the biggest challenge for any business, whether it is Fortune 500 publicly traded companies finding people or the small business that's trying to stay afloat. It is finding good people. And so I think one of the things that we've been blessed and fortunate with with Vincere and with our business is having really high quality people that we've been able to find. And sometimes those people come along sooner than maybe what you're ready to hire, and you have to say, you know what, we're going to make sacrifices, back to what we were talking about, to make sure you bring those people on. And I would encourage business owners, it's like, most likely the limiting factor is going to be the talent that you have on your team. So if you can solve that, there's a lot of other problems, but man, if you have a good team, you'll be in good shape long term. So I would say the talent and the just labor, I guess, is the term that they use in this little quote over here.
Yeah.
So, but I call it talent because I think there are going to be people that are talented, whether it's, hey, I need someone for manual labor, like they still need to make it look nice. We keep talking about landscaping. So the next business that Josh and I are both going to own has to be landscaping after this conversation. So when that drops, we'll let you know. But even in that, like, you want someone that has a good attention to detail that's not going to like destroy someone's yard, right? Like, you still need someone that cares, that gives a shit what's going on.
Yeah.
And that to me is still talent, where someone shows up, knows why they're there, and is consistent in what they're doing.
Yeah, and for the record, the reason landscaping business on my mind is actually this morning, I was going to try and hire somebody to aerate my lawn, going back to time, and like was told I would get quotes, never got the quotes sent to me, and so I finally just, like, my neighbor was like, "Hey, you want to rent an aerator and split the costs?" I was like, "Sure." And so I got up at 7 this morning and aerated my lawn before work. And so, like, that's where, like, another instance of, like, hey,
Sure.
I was willing to pay somebody, but there's obviously a business opportunity here in landscaping, even where I am. Like, yep. But yeah, that's just to give some.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember there was an episode where there's a term that you kept using and I made fun of you, and I can't remember. We'll find it in the archives at some point, and I'll bring it back up.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But yeah, like, I mean, there are ways to, like, I think, circle back to your talent kind of thing. Yeah, I think there's something we've been blessed with, but one thing that, like, I think a lot of business owners take for granted is they expect their employees to run their business and treat their business just like them. And, your employees are not owners, and, have that or do as good a job as you do, which it's never going to be the case. One, because, like, more often than not, we have overly high opinions of ourselves and the quality of work we do. So it takes some humbling on the account of the business owner to realize that, hey, you may think it's better, but your clients may not.
Sure.
And, like, I had to go through that same thing hiring advisors, because I used to think I was top tier advisor, and
the bee's knees.
Yeah. And then since hiring advisors, I'm realizing maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
The bar is low in our industry, but yeah, we have some really super people. Like, damn, they're really good at it.
Try not to tell them too much they're fit. No, I'm just
Yeah.
But along the lines, like, so, I mean, one of the things that you and I have done that I think has been really interesting in terms of seeing it unfold was not necessarily hiring people that we thought would treat our business the way we want to be, like we would treat it or whatever, but hiring people that are just passionate about something, and finding kind of like the nerds on the topic, for lack of a better term. Like, we've sort of asked in, like, different interviews, like, hey, tell us about, like, how you consume knowledge, what do you listen to, and we're not necessarily expecting, like, hey, someone to tell us all about, like, the finance books they read, but we've gotten answers of, like, oh yeah, like, I consume these murder mystery podcasts, like, or philosophy or whatever, but, like, you can just see the passion that, like, someone's pursuing this knowledge in their free time just because they're curious.
Yeah.
But, like, that's in a knowledge-based industry like we work in, like, requires a lot of research, a lot of curiosity, and creative thought. So, like, for us, that, like, is something that worked really well. I remember, like, I actually still to this day remember this, but, like, one of my first jobs in high school, I worked at a laser tag facility, And my manager there, I think, did one of the, now I think is one of the most creative ways of hiring kind of like high school staff. Like before, like we did a group interview of like 20 people, and he had like a sign-in sheet, but he specifically put the numbers on like uneven lines to see basically like quietly, like without saying anything, just basically said like sign in, but he would be like 1, skip a line, 2, skip 2 lines, 3, and he would basically see if people would write their name on like a designated line or not for like for detail orientation, following directions, that sort of thing. He would also randomly put trash throughout the area and basically look for who picked it up just naturally to throw it away. Asked for like within that group, we had to do like some presentations and blah blah as part of the job, and he would ask for like, okay, like if you were going to hire somebody from this group, who would you hire? And so he actually basically got the people in the group to kind of tell them who was the best. And so it was like, so it doesn't have like the things we do for interviewing to like find good people. Like there's things you can do to be creative to find like whatever job it is, if it's like attention to detail or whatever the job requires, like, you know, get creative, have a little fun with it, or ask weird questions. Like, you know, get away from the traditional, you know, tell me about your biggest weakness.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, like,
I care too much, Josh.
Yeah, those are all bullshit answers. Like, find the crux of a person and how they think and what kind of employee they're going to be. Like, try to find what drives them. Try to find those like habits that they can't help, like the, you know, the OCD-ness of like how attention to detail they are. Like, and that's where you'll find the people that, you know, may not, you know, do it as well as you do, or, you know, care about your business as much, but you can trust them to do what they're born to do. Basically.
Yeah, but you don't need more Josh and Isaiahs in the same bit. Like, you need people that will complement and be different. If you have a business full of the same personality types that only do the same thing, like, probably going to have some major issues. You have to hire some people that are going to be different, that think different, that want to challenge different things. That will be more beneficial than having all the same person.
Yeah, I mean, like,
so
I'm gonna throw him under the bus right now, but like, one of our advisors, Travis, is, you know,
shout out Travis.
Yeah, one of the biggest pains in the ass is in the best way possible, because like I know like whatever idea, yeah, exactly, whatever idea I have, like I purposely will throw in front of him, knowing I will get criticism.
He'll never listen to this anyway, so
yeah.
it's fine.
But like, I'll throw it to him knowing he will pick it apart for me.
Yeah,
and like, if I think it's like a, you know, my precious baby or whatever, if I want to find the problems with it, I'll throw it in front of him and be like, oh yeah, this part sucks, this sucks, like,
yeah,
you can make this better. And so, but like, that's how his brain thinks.
But when he says it's good, it's usually good.
Yeah, so yes, exactly.
That's the nice part.
So that's where,
yeah,
you know, like, you want those people, like, you don't want just yes men and women, you want like people with dissenting opinions, or people with complementary skill sets, or whatever.
Yeah, there's a difference between challenging things and being a person that wants to make everyone better and being an asshole, right? And so you'll have that. And obviously you got to get rid of the toxic people and cut the cord quick. But for people that actually care and are trying to make others better, and maybe that's not being like, okay, any other questions? And they still like, hey, yeah, over here, I have one more. And they're like, oh, but it's actually really good. And you're like, oh, that actually is a really good point.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you want, not the person that's just going to, you know, talk crap and frustrate people and just not be nice. So, yeah. Talent. That's what's going to make the business happen. Like, if you're trying to scale anything outside yourself, that's what you got to look for, in my opinion. Like, you have to get good people.
Yep, agreed. But I mean, long story short, with starting a business, and I think, you know, kind of the whole summary here is, like, it doesn't need to be as scary as, you know, the world makes it out to be, and you don't have to be as quote unquote ambitious as the world, you know, especially social media, make it out to be. Like, you don't have to have a 10-figure business or whatever. Like, having a business that pays you the same salary you're getting in maybe a more tax efficient way, but like,
and you can control your schedule. Like, that's worth a lot.
Yeah, like we have a lot of clients that have those type of businesses where, you know, they can, you know, hey, I want to go work from Europe for 2 months. See ya. And like,
not right now though, because they'll probably be cold. But.
Yeah, but like,
won't be able to keep the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. But, or let's go with Costa Rica. I want to go to work from Costa Rica. We actually had a client that did that. He was just like, yeah, I want to go work from Costa Rica. I can run my business down there.
Sweet.
Yeah, like, so I mean, like, just gives you a lot more opportunity, or like, you know, one of the reasons I like running a business is I'm a night owl. Like I don't function well before, 10 or 11. And like I just don't do my best thinking. My best thinking's done at midnight. Well, in traditional finance,
I've been asleep for 2 hours, by the way.
Yeah, but like that's my point. Like, but in like traditional finance, I had to show up at 7 to 5.
Yeah, with your tie on.
Yeah, with the tie on. Like, so I was like getting up super early and like just so like I was productive for maybe 2 hours a day.
Yeah,
and like where I'm now, I'm productive for 8-10 hours a day, easily. So it's just creating your own schedule has a lot of merit to it, aside from all the other benefits as well.
Yep. And that's where going back to the talent piece is hiring good people and getting out of the way and letting them do things. You can still hold them accountable, but structure their job in a way where they're able to bring their best work and don't try to, micromanage them. If you hire them, they're hiring them there for a reason. So pay them, let them go do their thing, and then, hold them accountable from there. But shoot, don't hamstring them by saying they have to come and, do a certain thing, right? Maybe your job does require a dress code or whatever, sure. But most places, like if you can be flexible and let them kind of take some ownership, they'll run with it and be happy and do a lot more for you.
Yeah,
a lot more for you.
We've seen that in our own business where
100%.
Sometimes I'd like to rein them in a little bit more, but at the same time, like they're producing some amazing stuff just by giving them a super, super, super long leash. You know what I mean?
Yep.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I mean, you hear everything getting corporate as things get bigger, where you have to have more scale and more. There is challenges as you become more of an enterprise that you have to bridge that. So, especially as a small business, lean into the benefits that are there for your smaller business, where you can compete in a different way. So. That's us rambling for quite a while on business stuff. What was the biggest takeaway for those that are listening, and what would be a small business topic that you want to hear more about? Let us know. Feel free to reach out across any of the different social medias. You can do it through, LinkedIn is easy for both Josh and I. I'm on Twitter. Instagram is an easy one. But yeah, just let us know where and what topic. I think one, like how to buy a small business that's already existing, would be an interesting topic. But yeah, just let us know what would be the most interesting. And Josh, what's the words of wisdom that we want to close with?
Moral of the story: start a business.
There we go. Boom.
Yeah.
Mic drop. To that point though, how many people have started businesses that you're smarter than, or you have the same amount of skill they do? As you get older, I think you realize how many people don't really know what the hell's going on anyways. Like, funny enough, right? So you can do it just as much as other people, and sure, you're going to skin your knee and bruise your elbow at times when you trip and fall, but you can do it as well. It's just all a matter of, is that what you want? Not everyone has to start a small business, but yeah, give it a shot. You can always go work for someone else.
Yeah, I think the C's to get degrees is very much the case with most business owners, where I don't know a lot of like Harvard graduate business owners and things like that, but I know a lot of very average or mediocre students. And so, like, if you're sitting and listening to this and you are a good student, super smart, super intelligent, there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't go start a business. Most of it, I think, just boils down to, you follow the rules for a long time, and sometimes hard to break away from them.
Yep.
And a certain life path. But, nothing gives you more freedom and flexibility and, ability to take control of your own life than starting a business or a side hustle or something just to get more income in the door and get more freedom in the door.
Yep. All right. That's where we're going to close. Like, subscribe, all the stuff that podcast people tell you to do. Share it with a friend, and let us know.
Yeah.
Till next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.